Hi, this is Chandrashekhar Prabhu once again. Thank you for the tremendous response. We have now got the draft of the Model Rent Act. It has been uploaded in the official website of the government. And so now we can officially speak to you. Why was the Model Rent Act required? The government says that there are vacant flats and these flats have remained vacant because they are not getting the tenants, and the tenants are not coming because there is no rent act in place. Totally wrong argument. The tenants have been there, the flats have been vacant. Why the government gives an argument that the tenants are not coming? They say the Rent Act doesn't provide for adequate rent to the owners. Look at the case study in Maharashtra. From 2002, any flat which has been built after the year 2002, the owner of the flat and the tenant can enter into an agreement and take and give any rent. There is no rent act that is applicable to the tenant or the landlord. The landlord can charge 1 lakh, 2 lakh, 5 lakh rupees a month rent also. There is nothing which stops. The rent act doesn't come in the way. Then for the vacant flats, why require a new rent act? We really don't know. They say that the deposit should not be more than 2 months. In Mumbai, in any case, for residential, no one takes more than 2 months deposit. So do we require a law? No. Under the leave-in license, for residential, the deposit is 2 months, and for commercial, the deposit is 6 months. Some people even take less. So do we require a law for that? No. To vacate a tenant, the Leave-in License Act is very clear. If the tenant doesn't pay the rent, he can be vacated. If the tenant doesn't do the things which he has promised to do, like paying electricity bills, telephone bills, water bills, he can be evicted. Under the Leave-in License Act, you don't require to change the Rent Act for that. We have a Leave-in License Act in place, and according to Leave-in License Act, there are millions of flats which are on rent. There are some which are vacant. They are vacant because they have been built in either God-forsaken places or the builder expects too much rent. The market forces are in place. If I can get a flat in Andheri at 25,000 rupees per month, if someone is asking 50,000, will I pay? I won't pay. I don't require to change my Rent Act for that. The Rent Act was meant to protect the urban middle class and poor. They have been there for generations. It was during the World War and beyond when there was a problem. People were not taking premises. The system of Pagdi came into being because the income tax rates were very, very high. And people paid the full market rate and came in as Pagdi tenants. Yes, there can be exception. There can be some landlords who gave the flats without charging Pagdi, but they are few and far between. But most transactions in Mumbai and around in the rest of Maharashtra have been by paying Pagdi. And the new act doesn't provide for them. Funnily enough, when I read the new act, I was shocked. Section 47 into bracket 1 and section 42 into 47 into bracket 2 says that the day the new Rent Act comes into place, the old Rent Act gets repealed. Mr. Puri, the Minister of Housing, however, in a Twitter says that this law is with prospective effect. I read the law again and again, 4 and 5 times. There is no where it is written that this law will be with prospective effect. When you ask the Ministry of Housing, they say it's up to the state. It means the center wants the state to enact these laws and then tell the tenants that, look, you have been evicted by the state. Now this thuggery won't do. You can cheat people one time, you can cheat people twice. You can't cheat people all the time. Rent acts have been there, model rent acts have been there time and again. 1, 2, 3, 4. I have seen 7 model rent acts being drafted and buried very respectfully because they are not applicable to Maharashtra. This one is also not applicable to Maharashtra. In the present rent act, if the building is built after 2002, then the owner of the flat can charge whatever he wants from the tenant, and the rent act doesn't apply. He can evict the tenant whenever he wants. That is what the present rent act gives. Not just that, let's go further. Even in an old building, it could be 50 years, 80 years, 100 years old. If a tenant wants to sell his flat and the owner says, no, don't sell it to me, I will pay you what another tenant would have given, and the owner buys the room and keeps it vacant for a period of 1 year, 12 months, then the landlord is entitled to charge whatever rent he wants in that premises. That premises goes out of the purview of the Rent Act. This is not the Model Rent Act, this is the existing Rent Act, and we felt that this was a bad clause and needed to be removed. But not only this was not removed, but now under the new act, there is no provision for succession. They say Rent Act means an agreement between two people. The moment the agreement is over, you have to vacate. You can't hand over your tenancy to your children or your heirs or whoever. Mumbai has been brought up. The pagdi means the full market rate on the premises was paid. Why was it paid? It was paid because the flat had been purchased. Only thing, there was no rent receipt or there was no receipt for the pagdi paid. Government sometime in early 2000 amended the law and made pagdi legal. Once pagdi is legal, you can accept and give pagdi. Since then, crores and crores of rupees have been taken as pagdi. And now those who have paid the full money as pagdi, you want to evict them? You want to say that if he doesn't leave after the agreement is over, he has to pay twice the rent or 4 times the rent? Sorry. The Leave and License Act has enough provision, many more provision than the Model Rent Act has. And under the Leave and License, anybody who wants to create new tenancies can create new tenancies. The landlord can get money, the tenant can get money. If the process of eviction under the Leave and License Act is difficult, that can be streamlined. If the Small Causes Court takes years and years for deciding on the Leave and Licenses agreement eviction, then we can have separate rent tribunals, sure enough. But for that, a new Rent Act is not required. The existing laws of Leave and License can be strengthened so that the landlord can get his due and the tenant can also be protected. But that doesn't require the old Rent Act to be removed. As it is, the old Rent Act has been challenged by the landlords and the matter is before the full bench of the Supreme Court. And what are the demands of the landlord? The landlords say that because between the year 1940 and the year 1987, where the freeze of rents were there, the rents were frozen. And so assuming that from 1940 onwards every year the rent should be permitted, the rent should be increased 100 times, 120 times, means not 120 percentage, mind you, means a person who is paying rent at 100 rupees will land up paying 15,000 or 20,000 rupees per month for a single room which is 10 by 10. Will he afford to pay that kind of rent? Definitely not. If he doesn't pay the rent, then he will be evicted. This is what the landlords want, and this is what is the matter pending before the Supreme Court. And they have been saying exactly the same thing, that the owner should not be forced to transfer the rented premises in his children's name or grandchildren's name, as the case may be. And now the model says the same thing. The minister says it is with prospective effect, but the draft doesn't mention the prospective effect. The government says we'll protect the tenants, but the draft doesn't mention anything of protection of tenants. However, the central government doesn't have right to direct the state government on rent laws. It's a state subject, the Rent Act. And the state can decide, and the state has decided. And it doesn't require counsel from the central government on that. Maharashtra government has been a progressive government. Time and again, it has shown to the center and told them that please don't teach us how to manage our tenants and landlords. We know how to do it. I'm sure there will be certain suggestions that need to be given, like having a rent tribunal or ensuring that the justice is delivered within a reasonable period of time. All these things are absolutely essential. They can be done within the existing rules. For that, you don't have to scrap the existing Rent Act. The government of Maharashtra is wise enough to understand this. It has been wise enough earlier too, when it told the center that please don't thrust the model on us. We know what the model can do. The model can bring 25 lakh people of Mumbai on the streets. We do not want this model. The earlier Rent Act can do with some more changes. The Leave and License Act can be strengthened so that the new premises which are out of the purview of the Rent Act can have certain protection for both the tenants and the landlord. The issue of repairs to the premises under the Leave and License can be sorted out. These are things which don't require such a big hullabaloo. Let the cabinet talk about big things, like we have been used to a lot of big things all the time. We have heard these big things. As far as the state of Maharashtra is concerned, we know that we do not require such flamboyant ideas. What we require is a sympathetic administration which looks at the woes of the tenants. What we require is a provision by which the tenants are not thrown on the streets by builder. 5,800 properties which have been taken over by builders are in limbo, where the tenants are out of the properties, buildings have been demolished and houses have not been given and the rents have been stopped. So many people are suffering hardships because they had to vacate their premises and trusted the landlord and builder put together to give them houses which have never come. 10 years, 15 years they've been suffering. So what is required is good laws to ensure that the redevelopment scheme should happen. In the year 1991, the new DC rules came. It is more than 30 years since then. And the law for old and dilapidated buildings for redevelopment, 19,800 buildings had to be redeveloped. Barely 3,000 buildings have been redeveloped in 30 years. At this rate, if you have to develop now, about 14,500 buildings are left. At the rate of 1,000 buildings per 10 years, you will require another 140 years or 200 years by the time all these buildings which are 60, 70 years old will collapse and people will die. So what is required is revamping of the redevelopment scheme and making it more pro people. We do not require rent tax to solve our problem. We have a rent act, we have a leave and license act. They can be amended suitably to support the tenants. We do not require the model. We do not require empty promises that this is going to be with prospective effect and no mention of prospective effect in the draft bill. No mention that tenants, the old tenants will be protected under the old rent act in the draft bill. You say one thing and you write another thing. This won't do. The tenants of Mumbai know that they are being cheated. And if you try and cheat them, they will rebel. So this is to request the government of Maharashtra that all the model rent acts so far have been delegated to the place which they deserve to be legitimately delegated to, which is the waste paper basket. Send this one to that as well. And what you do is think about the tenant, think also about the landlord, and think about redeveloping these buildings in a time-bound program without the tenants being cheated and the landlords being cheated by unscrupulous builders. Change the scheme to make it people-oriented. Self-redevelopment is the correct way in which both landlords and tenants will get adequate returns for their property. Bring in reforms in the existing laws, but do not stretch the patience of the people. This is a mild warning to those who dream about evicting the tenants. This is a mild warning to the government that please do not fall into the trap of this Model Rent Act. It doesn't deserve to be inflicted upon the old tenants in Mumbai. The government of Maharashtra should give it a decent burial and bring about the much needed reforms, the revamping of the redevelopment schemes so that the people themselves are empowered to redevelop their buildings in the self-redevelopment scheme. With this is Chandrashekhar Prabhu bidding you au revoir, promising you to come with more posts on this subject and many other subjects. Bye for now.